Welcome to Restoration of Spirit. I'm Janet Cole. On today's show, we're going to be visiting two public gardens. They're very restorative spots. One is the Merrick Rose Garden right here in Evanston, where we'll be meeting with the primary rose gardener, Gary Eanes, who's going to be giving us some rose gardening tips. And then the Shakespeare Garden, which is a hidden gem buried deep within the Northwestern University campus. And there we'll be meeting with Sue Carlson, the chair of the garden. So stick around because we've got a great show in store for you today. One of the things that I like to do to restore my spirit is gardening. I find gardening a very important thing to my own personal peace and well-being. When I'm in the garden, I start feeling good because my hands are in the dirt, digging around in the soil, and just pruning my roses or other flowers. It ends up being a very meditative and relaxing thing for me. Hi, I'm here now at the Merrick Rose Garden with Gary Eanes, the primary gardener. We have a beautiful day today.
Hi, yeah, it's wonderful.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we're going to hear a little bit about the history of the garden, a little bit about Gary himself and how he got this fantastic one-man job, and then we're going to get some gardening tips and some rose care tips. So why don't you tell us, how did you get this job? Because I know you'd wanted this job for quite a while, and typically whoever gets this job keeps it for years. So how did that happen?
Well, the old guy who took care of it, Mr. Kiss, he retired. He was probably here 30, 35 years taking care of the garden. And they said he was retiring, and I basically kind of threw my name out there, and they took me up on it, so I've been here for 13 years now. So.
Oh, wow. You know, when he retired, did he have his own little landscape business on the side?
Yeah, he did.
Because I think he used to mow my lawn about 15 years ago, and I didn't know he was the gardener here.
Short Hungarian man.
Yeah.
With a thick accent, yes, that was Mr. Kiss. Yeah.
That's interesting,
Yeah,
okay.
He was the mayor of Merrick.
So after he retired, then how did you kind of slip in? Because you were already working with the city at the time?
Yeah, I've been with the city for 15 years, and so I've been here 13 years now, and I basically volunteered, and so they've kept me here. I guess I've been doing an okay job.
But you wanted this position, right?
Yeah, sure.
Were you a gardener before?
Yeah, I've had some experience. I worked at a lawn and garden center earlier in life, and then I took care of the grounds at a local college, North Park College, for 6 years, and did a couple other things, and came to work for the city, and then shortly thereafter came to work at the garden here.
So what does your job here entail? Like, what do you do on a daily basis?
Oh boy, well, it depends on the season, of course, but primarily most of the year, or most of the growing season, I'm here doing a lot of housekeeping, deadheading, and sweeping, and making sure everything looks pretty, and that's basically what a garden is all about, you know, the beauty of the garden, so it's basically trying to keep that aesthetic.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a beautiful place here, and the roses just look beautiful and healthy, and you know, it's no wonder a lot of people get married here just about every weekend, right?
Yeah, there's usually a
lot of weddings here.
Ceremony here, yeah.
What about the history of the garden? What can you tell us about that?
Well, this used to be, apparently, the tennis courts for the Evanston Country Club, which was kitty corner from here. It was a different building, actually quite a beautiful building. And that became City Hall after the country club moved out, and this was the tennis courts, and the fellow that the name is Garden for, Clinton Merrick, he was an alderman in this area, and he was kind of a rose nut, according to his son, who I talked to a few years back, and he wanted a rose garden. So in 1944, they decided to build a rose garden here, and they started. He went up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on a fishing trip soon thereafter, and promptly died of a heart attack. Oh. And that's a lesson on how you get a rose garden named after you.
Okay, so that's the endings to the beginning of the rose garden.
Right.
And then can you tell us anything about the fountain that's behind us? Because that's a pretty significant piece of history too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That was down in Fountain Square, downtown Evanston. And when they started reconfiguring traffic after the war, people had more cars, there was more traffic, so they got it out of there. It sat in the city yard for about 5 years, and that's called Centennial Fountain. It was dedicated in 1876 and stayed at downtown until 1946, I think, and sat in the city yard, as I said, for a couple of years. And then it was when they started building this place, and I thought this would be a good place for the fountain. They had a restoration, brought it here, and it's been here ever since. And I think it's a great place for it.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. Didn't people try to do a big campaign to save the fountain and then have the fountain restored?
Right.
Yeah, so I think there was a big effort around saving it, restoring it, and then bringing it here.
Right.
And it's a great spot for it. It's really a beautiful fountain.
Yeah,
it's very peaceful to just kind of sit here.
And
a lot of times I bring my lunch and just sit in front of the fountain.
And the water, the sound of the water, even if it isn't cool, it's cooling. So.
Yeah. Great. Tell me, how do they choose which roses go in the garden and sort of the color scheme and that kind of thing? Because it looks really well thought out, the color palette.
Well, I wish that were so.
Happy accident?
Yeah, happy accident. You can't go wrong with roses. They're going to look great no matter what. I basically choose the roses, and we'll see what's performing and what isn't performing, and then...
So there's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, if something's not doing so well, out it goes, and we'll bring in something else, and see what happens. And we did have a redesign, especially back here behind the fountain a couple years back, and so we've kind of tried to have some thought go into that.
So do you have a lot of roses at your own garden at home?
I have about 3 or 4, but they don't get the attention that these get here. So.
Right. So when you're done here, you're kind of done with gardening, and then it's your time off.
Yes. Someone else is cutting the grass this year.
Well, tell us a little bit about roses in general, because a lot of people are really afraid of roses because they associate roses with the hybrid tea, which is really the toughest rose to grow. It needs the most maintenance and the most TLC. So what type of rose is this? This one's not really in bloom, but you can see some of them.
This, I believe, is a shrub rose. I can't remember the name of it. It's you'll get multiple blooms on that rose. Roses they're not as hard as their reputation.
So most people, the bad reputation is sort of hybrid teas, right? Because I know climbers and shrubs, and some of them require less maintenance and do really well on their own even.
Right.
And people just think hybrid tea, it needs so much sun and so much care that they try it once and it doesn't work out, and they just sort of give up with roses.
Sure.
So when you're in the garden, one thing that you notice is little placards of all of the rose names inside the beds. So most of the roses are labeled, right?
Right. Most of the nameplates you'll see, they're All-American selections, All-American Rose Selections. That's a non-profit consortium of growers and hybridizers, and they supply us with roses free. They'll have a number of picks each year, and it's kind of their marketing tool. They'll give us the roses for free. The idea is people come and see the roses. Oh, that's a nice rose. I'll go and buy that one. So it's kind of a marketing tool. We get free roses. Everybody wins.
Sounds good. And then what about the placards on the benches? I noticed some placards with names on the benches.
Right. That's for people who wish to memorialize a loved one. They'll contact our Parks Department, the city, and they'll donate some money, and they'll get a plaque on the bench. And I think all of them are currently taken. We're full.
Everybody wants to be in the rose garden.
Sure.
Not a bad place to be.
Dead
All
or
right,
alive.
well, why don't you tell us a little bit about rose gardening in general? Because I know a lot of people are really intimidated by roses, and when they think roses, they're really thinking about hybrid teas, which are probably the most difficult rose to maintain. They require the most sunlight and the most TLC and the most attention, and so if people don't succeed the first time around, sometimes they give up. But I know my experience has been better with shrub roses and climbers, and I really don't do too much to maintain mine, and they do pretty well.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about that?
All right, well, rose culture in general, you want to have a lot of sunlight. So full sunlight, that means 6 hours of sunlight a day. You want to give them a good drink of water, an inch or so of water, a couple times a week if you don't have any rain. You want to give them a shot or two of fertilizer a couple times a year, because you're always cutting the blooms. You're always forcing new blooms, so it helps to give them a little fertilizer. And yeah, hybrid teas are a little tougher. You want to don't pack them in together with other things. You want to give them some good airflow to keep the fungus down. You want to water the ground instead of the foliage, and that way that will also help keep the fungus.
Now, is that for all roses or specifically hybrid teas?
Pretty much all roses.
Pretty much
yeah.
all of them. Okay.
Yes.
Well, my flowers have taken a total beating this summer from the rain, so it's really sad for the flowers. But what about the foliage? How do you prevent the fungus from coming if we've had so much rain?
Well, as I said before, good cultural practices, spacing, and then don't compound the problem by watering the foliage when you do water. And you can spray preventatively with a fungicide.
Okay. We've had a lot of rain this summer. How does the heavy rain affect the roses? Both their health and the bloom.
Rain can be a problem. Physically, it'll beat the roses up, beat the blooms up. And so, but the other problem with all the rain is then that increases the possibility of, black spot fungus.
And so if you spray on the foliage, what does that do?
It's like any fungus. If it's damp, wet, and, you're going to get a fungus.
More likely to get the disease.
Right.
Okay.
Black spot is the primary one you need.
So spray the soil, keep them widely spaced so that they're getting air,
right,
enough sun and water. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about specifically with a hybrid tea?
They're not that more challenging than any other rose. Maybe that's because I'm here and I'm taking care of all the roses, so I don't see that much of a difference myself, but I'm here and I'm doing it, and so I don't
well,
think
also here we're out in the open and there is zero shade.
Yeah,
so this
believe
is
me,
a
I
full
know.
sun spot. So I mean, it's really perfect because there
Right.
aren't huge trees even bordering the garden to bring any shade in. So
Right.
the
There are
roses have a
few
happy
areas
home
of-
here.
Yeah, there are a few areas we have some shade, and roses will grow in shade, but they don't flower as much. The foliage won't be as lush, and yeah.
So would you say the sunlight is the most important thing?
Yes,
And then what? Water?
water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to show us some different varieties of roses and give us some tips on how to care for roses as we walk around and look at the many varieties that are here in the garden. But any final thoughts you can tell us about the garden or just roses in general?
Well, I would say about gardens in general, I think people come to gardens to have change their frame of reference. They want to sit, relax, look at something beautiful, and it's no coincidence that our creation stories happen in gardens. People like to have that change of mind and change of heart, and it really it's a good place to do that.
I agree. It's very restorative here in the garden, and I think that's one of the reasons why we like to talk about gardens and gardening on the show, is because it is such a calming, peaceful place to be here. Whether you're strolling around looking at the flowers or whether you're sitting by the fountain listening to the water, it's got a definite calming effect when you're in here. So
right. It's not always calming for me because I'm here trying to get the work done, but
so
at times I do step back and try to enjoy.
So what do you do to restore your spirit? If this is more of a job for you?
I try to nap as much as possible.
Well, that's great. See, he does all this hard work so all the rest of us can enjoy the garden.
Right.
All right, great. Well, thanks, and we're going to walk around now and check out some of the roses.
Wonderful.
Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this is a hybrid tea, and this is what most people consider the hardest rose to grow. I personally have not had a lot of luck with them, and I think I didn't put them in a place with enough sunlight. But my yard is a little bit more shady. Most of my garden is on the north, so I'm not lucky in that way. So I have not done well with hybrid teas, but I have with a lot of the other ones. So it's good to know that, you're telling us it's a lot easier than we think.
Yeah, yeah. And right now we're setting a lot of blooms coming into mid-August and early September. There's going to be a lot of blooms here the first week or two of September when the weather starts cooling off.
Yeah. So is there a best time to just plant the roses in the early spring? Because they bloom usually around Father's Day, like mid-June, and then they have a second flush in September, like you were saying.
Right. And modern roses That's right. And modern roses, they'll be blooming they're bred to bloom all year. There will be lots of blooms in the spring, some blooms all summer, and then another big flush of growth when it cools off in the fall, early fall. So
then putting them in the ground, if you're just starting out, would be when?
Yeah, we'll plant our roses. We buy them bare root, and we'll plant them in early April, mid-April.
Early April. Okay.
Yeah, sometime in April.
Seems so early in Chicago. It's still so
No,
cold. So
no.
April, you're safe.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're safe. Yeah, we'll come in and we cover our roses with some compost in the fall, just a little winter protection. And then we'll come in 1st of April or so, take that off, cart it out of here, leave some in the ground for amendment, and then prune the roses. And then we'll come in and then we'll have some time to plant all our new roses.
Well, it's good to
in
know that
April.
you compost here. So you do compost and mound the roses in the fall.
Right.
I typically do that in November, maybe
Yeah.
because I try to do it as late as I can.
Right.
And so then do you just mound them all up
Yeah,
around
we'll
the
just
base?
dump a quarter of a wheelbarrow full, maybe 10, 12 inches high. Gives it a little winter protection. It's not the cold weather that's really the harmful. It's the freezing and thawing. Basically, that's insulation. Keeps it cold, keeps it from freezing and thawing.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's look at some other roses.
All right.
Incredible. Is it in bloom like this the whole summer?
No, it's going to come in waves. So you're going to get a big bloom like this. We'll go through and deadhead it, and then you'll get another big flush of growth.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's called repeat blooming. And there's also roses that are going to kind of bloom continuously.
twice.
It's called continuous blooming. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the ones that really just have 1 or 2 good blooms in the spring
Yeah,
and the fall?
that tends to be more the old-fashioned roses. They tend to just bloom in the spring. But modern roses, they're bred to bloom
all the time. Yeah, this is
all
incredible.
summer.
And there's a lot of blooms on each,
Yeah,
which is different than the hybrid
Right,
tea, which
right.
typically has one
Right.
bloom, and people think of
Right.
the long-stemmed rose.
Exactly.
Whereas this has several
Exactly.
blooms per shoot.
The hybrid teas are going to be more upright, tend to have one bloom to a stem. Floribundas are smaller in stature, more blooms. They'll have kind of a panicle of blooms. And then you have the grandifloras, which are also upright, but they'll have, instead of a single bloom, they might have a couple blooms on a stem.
One other thing I've noticed that you do here quite meticulously, besides maintain all the roses, is actually the gravel paths. I mean, this really does look like a Zen garden because you can see these lines that he's raked in the garden so perfectly so that when somebody has their wedding here, it just looks, perfect, really.
Yeah, it's kind of labor intensive. It takes me a few hours. It kind of cleans it up, gives it a nice look, and you can ferret out any weeds or any other thing that is in the pathway while I'm doing it.
So is it meditative to do that? Because it looks very meditative.
No, it's not.
No?
Not if you've done it 1,000 times.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe I'll stop by on a Friday and I'll help with some raking. We're here in the beautiful Shakespeare Garden, hidden away on the Northwestern campus in Evanston, Illinois. And I'm joined by Sue Carlson, who's one of the co-chairs of the garden. So she helps actually maintain this beautiful place. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about the history of the garden? Because it's been here about 100 years almost, right?
Right, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary in 2015, but basically this is a very special place, and a group of ladies in Evanston back in 1915 formed a club, a garden club, and they needed a project, and so there was a big interest across the country in Shakespeare, and so they thought, let's do a Shakespeare Garden. And so originally the garden was to be mostly Shakespeare plants, things that are in his writings. They were pretty well connected. Mrs. Burnham was one of the founding members, and there was a famous landscape architect, Jens Jensen, who lived in the area, did a lot of work in Chicago, and so they talked him into doing the first design.
Yeah, I heard actually that they had to sort of twist his arm to get him to do it because he was so big at the time. He did the most of the local forest preserves and a lot of the cityscapes, public gardens, lakefront gardens.
So they talked him into it, he designed it, and he talked about you could see the prairie to the west and the lake to the east. Well, no longer can you see the lake to the east or the prairie because of You know, this is almost 100 years later. But he designed the basic, the bones of this garden. The seedlings, the hawthorn, we have a double all around the garden, just closing it in. We have a double row of hawthorns, and those seedlings came from France, I think in 1915, and they are still a lot of the same plants from those original
hawthorns.
Right, and they're sheared with a double hedge, so you get this wall that really encloses, even with all the construction that's gone up around it. The garden was really kind of completed by about 1919, 1920, and I think that's when the stone bench, which has beautiful carvings on it, was installed. And in the 1929, we have a beautiful fountain on the east end, which Daniel Burnham's son, who lived here in Evanston, dedicated to our garden.
Yeah, it has a beautiful sculpture of the face of Shakespeare on it, as well as some quotes from some of his writings on there, and a little lion head fountain. It's really beautiful and peaceful, sitting there hearing the water trickle. Now that it's working, right?
That's right, and it isn't always working. There are years when it doesn't work, and we partner with Northwestern. The land is Northwestern's, and they often help us out. Now we also have a beautiful sundial in the middle. It was originally at the west end, and in 1990, when John Brooks was doing the walled garden at the Botanic Garden, some of our garden club members talked him into helping us with a redesign, and we moved the sundial from the west end into the center and created more of this rotunda area. And then he also wanted it to feel a little more like England, and added all these antique bricks all around, and opened up the middle of the garden with kind of a spillover effect. I feel like this is such a special place with all the busyness in our world, and there isn't really a day that I've worked here or been here on the weekend that people don't come through. Couples who have been married here, 50 years ago, they come back. Young lovers are having a little picnic on a bench. Just children come through and they say thank you. They love this place, and so it's just, to me, it's a privilege. And those of us, and I think maybe I said this at the beginning, I feel like it is really our garden club. A gift to the community of Evanston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It's just a beautiful, special place, and so many people really enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. If you look to the south, that's Garrett Seminary, you take photo. I mean, it really does look like you're in England. You don't feel like you're in Evanston, Illinois.
Yeah. Well, it is such a sacred space, I think, just entering it, the energy here because of the flowers and all of the animals and plants. Energetically, when you walk in here, it's just like, you just can feel it. So even with, some of the noise that's going on with the construction, that kind of just all goes away once you're sitting here, and, you kind of get into your own little world, I think.
Absolutely.
Relaxing, and it's just so peaceful.
We stay with those principles based on Jens Jensen and the Shakespeare plants and what John Brooks said, but then we take a little license with, some of us like red in the garden, some of us don't. So it's always a little bit different. And I've gone to many Shakespeare gardens in the country, and I have to say I'm very proud of this garden.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like you're in France or in England when you come in here. This garden really looks fabulous the entire summer. Well, the roses are in full bloom in June, and now we've got, the lilies are just starting to end, but we've still got...
we'll have Japanese anemones coming, which are just beautiful, the white anemones here. Late fall, all the colors change, the light changes. It looks pretty spectacular in the winter. It's beautiful in the winter, covered in snow.
Yeah, it is.
And then early spring is, of course, just that exciting, one of my favorite times whenever it's new growth.
This really is just a fabulous place. Students come here to eat their lunch.
Oh.
People come to just meditate or write or reflect.
Photographers are here all the time taking photographs. You know, the different vistas, but also close-ups. A lot of photographers come through the garden.
People courting, people's weddings, people coming back after their weddings.
Right.
It's definitely a place that if you come here once, you'll be back. I can assure you of that. Well, I read that one of the previous co-chairs said that every time she's here weeding or planting or working in the garden, that somebody comes up to her and says, thank you, thank you for this. And like you said, this is such a gift to the community and to anybody who comes here. So thank you isn't enough to you for your hard work and your weeding and your labor and being on the show, but really you're becoming a piece of history too with this wonderful place that's been here for almost 100 years. So thanks for being on the show. Another thing that I really like to do that makes me feel good is to go to these public gardens, because you can stroll around, smell the flowers, hear the birds singing, listen to the fountain, and it becomes very relaxing. It takes you out of the busy day that you might have been having before getting to the garden, and it really helps you just slow down. Slows down your pulse, your heart rate, makes you start really feeling good, and that's really restorative. That restores our body, our mind, our spirit, just by being in the garden and being in the presence of nature, around all of the living plants, flowers, insects, bugs, everything, and listening to the birds chirp. It really just fills me up. So I hope that you take some time and visit a public garden or do a little gardening of your own in your own backyard to restore your spirit.